Are you ready?
Let's go.
Now circling in the neutral zone.
Here's the pitch on the way. 36 yards for the win.
This.
Here comes a big chance. The shot
is
this the dagger?
The neutral zone.
This is as good as it gets.
The Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca.
Now, here's your host, two-time Paralympian, Brock Richardson.
What's going on? It's time for another edition of The Neutral Zone. I am indeed your host, Brock Richardson, and coming up on this edition of The Neutral Zone, I had the pleasure of speaking with co-chef de mission Karolina Wisniewska about her experience at the Paralympic Games, as I try to get this out in English, as chef de mission. Plus, we're going to give you a roundup about the World Junior Hockey Championships, as it's been a bit wild for Canada. And then we're going to talk a little bit about this and that, depending on how much time we have remaining. I'm joined by Josh Watson and Cam Jenkins. Here come your headlines.
Neutral Zone headlines.
Starting off our headlines this week, we congratulate the Milwaukee Bucks for winning the second annual NBA Cup in-season tournament. They defeated the Oklahoma City Thunder 97-81 to capture the title. It will be interesting to see if this is a precursor for the NBA Finals coming up in a few months.
Penn State volleyball coach Katie Schumacher-Colley makes history, becoming the first female head coach to win an NCAA National Women's Volleyball Championship. So we definitely want to congratulate Katie on her accomplishment, and may her future in basketball get more success.
We're full of congratulations in the headlines as it continues. Summer McIntosh has been named the Canadian Press Female Athlete of the Year for 2024. This is the second Female Athlete of the Year award she has been given this year, so pretty cool. She was given a Northern Female Athlete of the Year award a couple of months ago, so congratulations to her. I also want to shout out Ethan Katzberg, who won the gold medal in hammer throw, and he was named the Male Athlete of the Year for Canadian Press. So they have been pretty tied with each other because they were co-flag bearers, and now they are co-athletes of the year, so congratulations to both of them. Those are your headlines for this week. If you want to get a hold of us on social, here's how you can do that.
And welcome back to the Neutral Zone broadcast booth.
Play ball!
We're set to get this bowl game underway. The first pitch is brought to you by Brock Richardson's X account at Neutral Zone BR. First pitch and a strike. Hey gang, why not strike up a chat with Claire Buchanan from the Neutral Zone? Find her on X at Neutral Zone CB. There's a swing of the chopper out to second base, right at Claire as she picks up the ball, throws it over to the first base for a routine play.
Out!
And fans, there's nothing routine about connecting with Cam and Josh from the Neutral Zone at Neutral Zone Cam J and at J Watson 200. And the Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Connect with them at ON Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca. Now that's a winning combination.
We are pleased to be joined by the other co-chef de mission, Karolina Wisniewska, who joins us now. Karolina, so nice to have you back on the program. The last time we had you and Josh just ahead of the Pan Am Games, and now we're back together talking about post-Paralympics. So nice to have you back with us.
Thank you for having me.
Can we start by talking a little bit about when you guys first arrived in Paris? What was the first initial duties that you were responsible for before some of the athletes arrived?
Well, actually, Brock, you may not know, I unfortunately had a pretty severe injury and surgery right before the games. So I arrived later than anticipated. However, upon arrival, both Josh and I were mostly, the main thing we were doing were the welcoming info sessions for the athletes and teams that were there for the first wave, because athletes and teams were coming in at different times throughout the games, depending on their competition schedule.
Fantastic. I guess that's helpful when athletes come in sort of waves rather than, one big chunk. You can kind of do individual seminars, and I would imagine that kind of breaks it up. And I'm very sorry to hear that you had a surgery. I hope all went well with that, but glad you could still attend the games.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Which actually leads sort of nicely into my next question for you. You and Josh were in some pretty coveted positions. Was there a moment during the games where you kind of caught yourself and said, "Oh my goodness, I'm a co-chef de mission at a Paralympic Games"? And if so, can you tell us a little bit about that?
I ever really had a moment like that when I've known for a long time that I wanted to be a chef de mission or something of the kind. I think there were a lot of moments at the Paris Games in Paris itself where you would look around and you would think to yourself, wow, I'm here. I think those kinds of moments were applicable across the board, whether you were a chef de mission or not. But being in the chef de mission role in Paris was not a surprise to me. It was kind of like I prepared for it the way I did for ski racing, which is to say I was well prepared. So I wasn't really in shock that there I was, other than the fact that I had severely injured myself. So that part, I was very grateful to have made it in time.
And since we're on the topic, did the injury inhibit you in any way in doing your duties to the best of your ability, or were you able to just kind of manage one and the other at the same time?
It inhibited me. I had a severe fall and I broke my humerus, which is the upper bone in your arm, in 6 different places, which caused the paralysis of my lower right arm, and I'm right-handed. So, and that's still the case. So I have all sorts of metal in my shoulder and my arm, and then my right forearm, wrist, and hand are paralyzed. So that was all new to me. Of course, I am a person with a disability and a Paralympian, but this injury is new. So it was a challenge in terms of the intensity of a Paralympic Games and how much you do in a day and how much moving around you do and how much changing of clothes you do. And, how quickly people expect you to put your shoes on and tie your shoelaces or open and close a car door or get in and out of a vehicle. So it was interesting. I'm also terribly independent. I think I always have been. So there were definitely moments where it was like, oh goodness. And of course it was really not long after. The opening ceremony was exactly a month after my surgery date, which is not a long time for such a traumatic injury. So there was still quite a high level of pain and painkillers and so on.
Wow, that's impressive. And we talk about, para athletes being resilient. I think that example you sort of take the cake on that one, to be resilient and be able to do this and only have a month, because how soon after the injury were you supposed to go to Paris? How
I was going to go very soon after. The injury happened on July 26th, which happened to be the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games. I was operated 2 days later, and I had planned to be in Paris quite a bit earlier because I usually suffer from jet lag and so on, and I just wanted to get my little Parisian experience in before the games because I know how intense games are. So I knew that I wouldn't be I would be having a games experience in Paris, but I wouldn't be having a Parisian experience in Paris, if you will. So none of that happened. And, I ended up going a lot later than I had anticipated. Later, even then, Josh, who was arriving at the prescribed time for us as chefs, just a few days later. But yeah, this isn't really about my injury or, how that happened. I think we should be talking about the games, the athletes, how Canada did, and all of that. The injury played a part, but it's not really the highlight, I would say.
No, of course, and we're gonna get there for sure. There's lots of good things to talk about. I just would be a bad host if I just rolled right through I had an injury and just kind of let's talk about the meat and potatoes. But as you said, let's talk about those meat and potatoes of the event. Was there moments or a moment that really stands out to you from the athlete's perspective and what you got to witness?
There are so many. I was really, really fortunate, and I made it kind of a point for myself from the instant that I interviewed for the position of chef de mission, co-chef de mission. My number one concern was for athletes, and I was very, very clear about that and about building a relationship with as many of those athletes as I could. So I really took it upon myself to try to get to know as many of the athletes in person as I could. Of course, that wasn't possible for each and every athlete, but I nevertheless built quite a few relationships before the games, whether that was in Santiago or at test events or at media events, what have you, which is great and so important. And I think often overlooked. I remember being an athlete and being like, who is this? First of all, chefs back then were not former athletes. And I'd be like, who is this person? And why are they in my space? And why are they talking to me? And why are they bothering me? And I didn't want to be that chef de mission. I didn't want to be showing up out of the blue being like, hey, I'm Karolina, your chef de mission, your co-chef de mission with Josh, just here to annoy you or whatever, get in your face. I did not want to be that person. I wanted to be, and I think I succeeded, I wanted to be the chef de mission who is there cheering you on, familiar face, person who was a high performance Paralympian and had a ton of success, and also everything else in between, has gone through the injuries even before this one, has been through the gamut and knows what it's about. So a trusted and familiar face. And I think I really, really succeeded there. And I did build some wonderful relationships with athletes. I think one of the most memorable moments for me was I went to what ended up being the last game of the women's goalball team against Israel, where they were defeated by Israel. And of course, when you go to a match, you don't know if it's going to be the last or what the result will be. And the whole stadium had emptied, and I was still there with my flag, but not where the team was. And I was kind of shaking my flag with my one arm. And a Paris volunteer came up to me, and fortunately, I'm completely bilingual. And she said, oh, would you like to go over there? She didn't know I was a chef de mission. She said, would you like to go over there? And I said, yes, please. So she, let me through. And I just kind of stood off to the side, but with an eye on the team. And Amy Burke, who's one of the leading figures in that team, we already knew each other. I'd made a point of getting to know her before the games. And I saw she was with her family. And then she saw me, and so gracious after such a big loss, and she was thanking me for being there. And I was like, of course I'm going to be here. Where else would I be? And I just kind of looked at her, and I gave her a big hug, and we're hugging. And as we're hugging, I said in her ear, I said, do you feel like sobbing right now? I said, if you like, just whatever you need to do, just do it, and she did. And I think that is what a chef de mission is for.
Wow, that is some powerful stuff. I think when you think of the role, you think of an all-encompassing, and that's why for me, I look at the past number of games. I don't want to put a number on it because I don't have it in front of me, but the past number of games where they've used athletes to be in those moments, and exactly the moment you talked about. You're there. You've been through the grind, the preparing, the excitement, the defeat, all those things. And so I think for you to whisper in Amy's ear and basically give her the permission to say, whatever you need to do, just do it. I'm here. I don't think you can teach that to a chef, in the sense that if you're not been there, you can't teach that to someone.
Yeah, and also in fairness, I don't know that I would have said that to every athlete, but I knew Amy. So like I knew that first I said, can I give you a hug? Do you want a hug? Kind of thing. But yeah, you're right. It's really A, that relationship, and then B, the fact that Amy knows just as well as hopefully the next Paralympian on the team that, yeah, Karolina has been there, done that. I know what it feels like, and it feels awful. It feels awful, and it's so difficult. And, I have to say, our Canadian Paralympians at every turn, win, lose, or draw, always so gracious and so classy and so wonderful and such a joy to be around, even in difficult moments. And I think that's something to be incredibly proud of as a nation.
I was talking about this with Josh when we did the interview, and I'm curious to your response to this as well. 27 medals ties a Summer Paralympic record. What do you attribute all of that success to for the athletes?
So many things. There was a lot of talk about, Paris was so different because there were people in the stands as opposed to Tokyo. But, as a Paralympian who's worked for those, in this case, 3 years or 4 years, that's not really going to make the difference at the end of the day. I do think there was an energy and excitement to Paris, but that's not going to push you through and give you a medal. It's all the work that you did in the years and months and weeks and days before. I think, just like many things, sport is somewhat cyclical. I think Paralympic sport is really, and not just in Canada, internationally and worldwide, is absolutely on the upswing. So I think there is more attention, more effort, and perhaps hopefully more funding going towards Paralympians. It's a slow process. I think the Paralympic movement is on a huge upswing and we're a little bit behind. We still have some catching up to do. But I do think that the wonderful performance in Paris by our Paralympic team is partly due to this upswing. And hopefully we can maintain that momentum. But really, at the end of the day, it's actually just due to the hard work and determination of the individual athletes who accomplished those results. At the end of the day, that's really what it is. If those athletes didn't exist, we wouldn't have a Paralympic team. We wouldn't have coaches to coach them. We wouldn't have ISTs to support them, integrated service teams. So, I can say all these things, but we can't forget that at the end of the day, it's the athletes who did it.
One of the messages that really stood out, and one that I actually got a little emotional when I saw it on the Canadian Paralympic Committee's social media, was you guys were talking to the athletes prior to the closing ceremonies, and the message was, we're going to go home, we're going to go back to our normal lives, we're going to do all the things that we normally do, live in the moment and live in the now. Why do you, as co-chef de mission, along with Josh, feel that was an important message at that particular time?
I think I have to credit that one to Josh because I think I spoke first and then he spoke next, and that sounds like something Josh would have said. But it's a great message because I think what happens at games often, especially as we're going into the opening or closing ceremony, and none of our athletes would have been at both, it's really easy to kind of get lost in it and kind of be like, oh, I'm here. This is crazy. Wow. Oh, it's over. And especially for the closing ceremony, it's the closing ceremony. It's the end of a huge games. I would say the best Paralympic Games the world has ever seen. And the closing ceremony was at that level. It was insane. So I think it was really an important message to drill home. Also because, we often talk about the athletes who did well and the athletes who got medals. but both Josh and I, we talked a lot over the time that we were co-chefs in Santiago, of course, and in Paris. And we talked about the importance of the entire team, of all of those athletes and each of their experiences, which is to say some of them were first-time Paralympians with no chance at a medal. And they probably knew that, but they were there to do their best, to have their Paralympic experience, to represent Canada. Some perhaps thought they had no chance at a medal, but got one anyway. And then the reverse happens too. Some thought they would get a medal and they didn't. And, it's a whole mixed bag. So the point about being there in the now, it resonates with high performance athletes because that's what we do when we're performing. And it's also just good to remember that at those moments of celebration as well.
Yeah, one of the things that came out of these games was the fact of the equal funding, and that was something that we had all been looking forward to, back when I competed in 2008 and 2012. We were waiting, for our announcement when they announced that the Olympians would be getting it in 2008, and we're waiting and nothing. And here we are in 2024, and we finally get that announcement. Well, the athletes had over $500,000 worth of medals and the money won. What do you think that does for the Paralympic movement now in this moment and moving forward?
Yeah, it's a really huge thing. And just to be, for those who are listening who may not be aware, this is money for medals, which Olympians have been receiving since Beijing 2008, and which was announced prior to, I was emceeing the announcement when it was made. And so these Paris Games are the first Paralympic Games at which Paralympians will now and forever, hopefully, receive money for medals, which is to say, and offhand, I don't remember, it's a different amount for bronze, silver, and gold. And it is supported by the government of Canada, so Sport Canada, but also by Sanjay Malavia, who's an extraordinary individual and a very generous human being. And he is really, devoted to the Paralympic movement, and he was there, and he's amazing. And I think he had a lot to do with pushing for this money for medals for Paralympians. And so what I think it means is that finally, as I said actually in an interview with Devin Haru in Santiago, I said, well, it's like putting your money where your mouth is, which is to say, let's stop saying things like, oh, you're equal, you're the same, you're just as good, but we're still not getting the same things. Put your money where your mouth is. And so this is happening, and it's wonderful. It's really, really good for people such as myself, who, when I was an athlete, I competed at 3 games. That's 3 cycles. That's 12 years, just those cycles, not counting all the years before. And it depends on your sport, but ski racing is not a sport you can just pick up and win a medal in. It kind of takes a lifetime. Different sports work differently, of course, but that kind of recognition, backed up with the money, would have been wonderful for someone like me, especially because I won 8 medals over my career. So it would have made a huge difference in terms of how stable I felt as an athlete, and continuing to be an athlete and putting my body on the line. Again, I chose a sport that, has a lot of crashes, a lot of injuries, and so on and so forth. So I think these things are really important. And it's not necessarily just about the money, but the money means something. It means a recognition.
Yeah, I hear. We have had Devin on the program multiple times throughout this cycle, throughout other cycles, and I'm sure Devin would have really, really appreciated your answer of, it's like putting your money where your mouth is, because I'm sure he would have totally agreed with what you had to say there. And yeah, we've spent lots of time with Devin, and it's good to hear. And for the audience, and we talked a little bit about Karolina's injury. I promise I wrote this question before I had any idea of the injury, but I'm going to ask it anyways. if you could have changed anything during your time of chef de mission, what would it have been, aside from the obvious of maybe not having the fall, but as chef, if you could have changed something, is there one or a couple of things that you would look back and say, I wish I did A, B, or C?
Well, the injury happened before the game, so I don't count that as a chef thing. And yeah, it would have been nice not to be injured, but that doesn't change the fact of what I went there to do. And for those of you who don't know, Brock was kind enough to share the questions with me in advance. And I remember reading this and thinking, no, there's nothing I would change. It was awesome. It was great. I mean, other than maybe having an extra day just to instead of rushing to the airport at 5 a.m. after the closing ceremony the night before, it would have been nice to have an extra day just to, pack my bag slowly with my one arm, not be so rushed. Mm-hmm. But games are always a bit of a rush, in the good way, like rush, they're exciting, but they're also very rushed. You're always rushing from place to place. But really, there's nothing I would change. It really is a lot less about me and my experience as chef or co-chef with Josh. And we have talked since the games, and we're both really pleased with how we did as a team, as a duo, as a team, as Team Canada, and as individuals. I think we were very pleased with how everything turned out. So really, there's nothing I would change.
Okay, was there something that you learned about yourself because of being in this role that you wouldn't have necessarily learned but for being in the role?
Again, it's funny because, as I said earlier, I've always wanted to be a chef de mission. I've always wanted to be in this type of a leadership role. I feel that I have the skills and the personality and the experience for it. So, of course, I was thrilled when I was asked to take on the role. So I felt quite confident that, I have the attributes that are necessary. And I think if anything, Paris just highlighted that for me. It's like, oh my God, I'm so perfect for this. I just love doing it. It's just so great. Meaning, I love building relationships with athletes. I love supporting them, good or bad. I love talking to the media. I love, hanging out with partners and sponsors and explaining the Paralympic movement to them and Paralympic sport and disability. I genuinely am this kind of open book and very excited proponent of being a person with a disability, being a Paralympian, being a representative of Canada, being a representative of women in sport. That is always really important to me. So many things about being a chef or a co-chef resonate with me. And I feel like the whole time I just had a huge smile on my face, other than if I was crying along with an athlete. But it really was for me the coming together of all these parts of my personality and my personal history and my own aptitudes that made me feel like, and I joked about this in Santiago with Karen O'Neill, who's the CEO of the Canadian Paralympic Committee. I said, Karen, does Chef for Life exist? Because I feel like I should just be the chef for life. I want to be the chef de mission forever. I know that's not possible. And I'm also a big proponent of letting the younger generation come in and take their space and take their leadership positions. Absolutely. But as a joke, if Chef for Life were a thing, please put my name down at the top of the list, because I want to be Chef for Life.
Yeah, no, and I mean, both times we've had the pleasure of having you on the program, I have said I love Karolina's energy, and I think, you and Josh kind of work together well from the periphery, because I know he has energy, but he's on the opposite end where he's very, philosophical. He's very, just different personality. He has his fun times. I will keep some of those to myself because we competed for a long time together, but it's just, I think they picked a perfect balance for the chef de missions and the co-chef de missions. And it's funny you should bring this up, because I asked Josh after we stopped hitting record I asked him, I said, hey, Josh, is there, a way of, becoming chef de mission again in the future? And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, Brock, if Chantal Petitclerc has not been asked to do it again, I don't think anybody will be asked to do it again. And that was his honest answer, and he was very quick, although he did step back and think about it just for 1 second. But yeah, I mean, it's a
not thought of that. I'm like, okay, and I sort of know Chantal Petitclerc not that well, but I'm like, oh, I think I'm I'm not a better chef, but I'm like, oh, I could do it. But all this to say, you're absolutely right. I really do think, and if I haven't made that clear, I think I was really lucky to have Josh as my co-chef, and I think he was lucky to have me. We really were, and we appear to be so different, but actually when the two of us talk and our visions and our thoughts about the Paralympic movement in Canada and our thoughts about how things should be are very similar. I think we're both, highly intelligent, thoughtful people who have been in the Paralympic movement for a long time. So we've seen certain things. And to me, Josh is, and this is a luxury of being a co-chef de mission, I had this wonderful sounding board who understood without me having to explain, what I was aiming at. And I think we went in really kind of aiming for the same things. And as I mentioned before, I think we were very successful in that. And hopefully the rest of Team Canada feels that way too.
You talked about this briefly, but we'll close with this question. I know a lot of the concern from members of the media and just athletes in general was accessibility around Paris and what that would be. How would you say Paris did overall?
I think it's a better question for Josh. He was very concerned about this. And he definitely had his spidey senses out, checking it out. I thought it was interesting being a newly injured person. My disability is cerebral palsy, but I'm ambulatory, so I walk, but I trip and I don't have good balance. And there I was with my absolutely busted arm with my bad balance and so on. It was really quite good. Not perfect. I mean, Paris is an ancient city, but it was good. I mean, and I don't know that I didn't go to every venue, but I went to a lot of venues, and, I was sometimes coming in a special way, sometimes going in with all the spectators. It was very, very good. I don't even know that the fact that I'm fully bilingual helped me that much, but I'm, smiling and bilingual helps because, if I needed help or directions, I'd be like, hey, where am I going? Whatever. But I don't even think that was necessary. No, I think that with the exception maybe of the Champs-Élysées for the opening ceremony, which was meant to be kind of smooth the whole way, and it wasn't quite. And that's a long distance to cover from the Arc de Triomphe to Place de la Concorde, which is where the outdoor stadium was, which was beautiful and wonderful and lined with thousands of people. And that was incredible. It wasn't quite a smooth surface, and for people using wheelchairs, that's not the most pleasant thing. But still, overall, I think that the accessibility that they had in place for these Paralympics was really quite good. I didn't hear any issues from athletes about accessibility at all.
Fantastic. And Josh did mention to me when we did the interview, because full disclosure, we basically did these interviews back to back. They're being played on different weeks, but they were back to back. And Josh told me that he was worried about the accessibility. That was really his top priority, and he was pleasantly surprised. So that's good news, and I'm very glad. I will tell you this: I when I watched the opening ceremonies for the Olympic Games, I thought, are we gonna get the boat thing with the para athletes? And I'm thinking that would be cool, but I don't need boats capsizing with wheelchairs on it. But they did a really nice job. I was doing a media tour on radio during the Paralympic Games, and just kind of giving a preview with my history of the Paralympics, and they said, how do you feel about the Champs-Élysées and the images? And I'm like, I love it. This is great. Sometimes we often think, the Paralympics is an afterthought. Not this time with the opening and closing ceremonies. They did a tremendous job. So very
and the full games in between. It was not an afterthought at all. It was clearly integrated into their planning from the get-go. There was nothing about the Paralympic Games in Paris that felt like an afterthought to me. And that's saying a lot. And especially in a huge world-renowned city such as Paris. I mean, they could really have kind of let it go, and they didn't. They did a fantastic job.
Fantastic. Speaking of someone who did a fantastic job, we always appreciate having you on the program, and we thank you so much for coming, and we wish you the best in your recovery and all that. And you did a wonderful job as Chef de Mission, I have heard through the grapevine. So congratulations on your success as well. So
yay! It's not just me who's imagining it. Oh, it was wonderful, and thanks again for having me on the program, Brock.
The Neutral Zone is sponsored by the Ontario Para Network. Their focus on the growth and development of wheelchair basketball, tennis, and rugby in Ontario.
As we discussed earlier on in the show, Canadian summer swimmer Summer McIntosh recently won Female Athlete of the Year for the Canadian Press, and I mentioned also in the headline that Ethan Katzberg also won the Male Athlete of the Year for Canadian Press. I'm curious for you guys, with all of the medals you can win and be on the podium for Worlds or the Olympic Games or what have you, what do these types of accolades mean when you can be named Athlete of the Year or be given an award for humanitarian stuff, things like that? Does that mean more to athletes, less, the same? Where do you guys fit on this discussion? Cameron, start with you, and we'll go straight over to Josh.
Well, I think that when a person wins something like Canadian Athlete of the Year, I really think that, yes, it holds a place in their heart, or they're happy with that achievement. However, if you ask any, and I'll just use pro sports, if Sidney Crosby has to choose between the Canadian Athlete of the Year and the Stanley Cup, what do you think he's going to choose? He's going to choose Stanley Cup. And anyone in the NFL is going to choose the Vince Lombardi Trophy. Any award that you're part of that team, or even if it's not part of a team, even if you're swimming, you want that gold medal, or you want that Stanley Cup, you want that, the NBA Finals trophy. You want that more than being Athlete of the Year for your country. Because I think in Summer's case, swimming for your country and getting that gold for Canada means a lot more than just getting Canadian Athlete of the Year, the Female Athlete of the Year. So.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you on that, Cameron. I would say certainly that the Olympic medals and the World Championships are probably the most important. But I don't think in this case we would downplay a female and a male athlete of the year, simply because there are so many athletes in Canada that could have won this award. We've seen professional hockey players win it. We've seen any number of different people win this award. So it's not necessarily, as far as I'm aware, limited to just amateur athletics. And so in that instance, I do think it carries a bit more weight, but I agree with you that certainly if you have a chance to win a world championship or a league championship, as in a Stanley Cup or an NBA championship, that I believe is going to mean the most to you, or in this case, an Olympic medal.
Yeah, even as an amateur athlete, getting gold to win gold for your country, I think that means more than being a Canadian Athlete of the Year.
I do. I just don't know that it's sort of dismissed. Like, I think in some cases, an Olympic athlete might not pay as much attention to, say, a Canadian championship as they would an Olympic medal. But in this case, being athlete of the year out of all those athletes, I just think means a little bit more. Maybe not as much, but yeah.
A little bit
at the
more
end of it, we all agree.
athletes.
Yeah, at the end of it all, we do agree that that it's not as important, but I think it's still up there.
I'll give you guys a actual example for my career, and just for context purposes, over my career, which spanned 15 years of my life, I managed to get a grand total of 79 medals. Very annoyed when I counted them within the last year that I wasn't able to get to 80. But most of those were national title, provincial title. There was some international medals, but there's one achievement that I am very, very proud of, and it's separated into two different awards. And these achievements are not Athlete of the Year, but both of these achievements were Spirit of the Game awards. And that's because I believed that I stood by my values, by my morals. Sure, would I have liked to have, been on the podium? Absolutely. But there's one instance where I can think of where I was at a national championship. I was winning this game by quite a lot, and this individual had not even scored a point at the event, and he was very new, very green, and he had what we would call the perfect first ball on the jack, which means that the ball was covering the white ball. It was not visible by the other opponent. He did that with his last ball, and I then had all six, and I decided to give him that point. It was in the fourth end, and that made that athlete's day, that athlete's career, that athlete's whatever you want to call it. And I won the Spirit of the Game award in Montreal because of this. And I remember my family coming to me after the game and putting their hand on my shoulder and saying, "We're proud of the decision you made," and that giving the person, the career highlight. I've never seen him again at another event, whether I'm commentating it or playing it. I've only seen him in one situation, and that award to me means more than anything else that I've gotten. Now, I've never been close to a Paralympic medal, so I can't speak on that, Josh, but I can certainly speak that certain awards mean something than others.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in that instance, you've probably set that athlete up to at least have a career highlight and say that, I scored a point against an internationally ranked athlete, which for some of us, that is an absolute career milestone. It's a very big deal. I mean, I've had my share of events over the years, and there's not a lot of international accolade necessarily, but I can say that I have played against a Russian team, and maybe we didn't win, but we at least tried our best. But I can at least say that I have played an international hockey game or two. Depends on if you count Buffalo as being international or not. I suppose technically they are, but yeah.
And across the border, we'll call that as international.
Sure, that works.
But if we become the 51st state, we may not be international anymore.
Oh, boy. Yeah, let's not get into that.
Governor Trudeau. Yeah. I can hear people in my head stick to sports. Yeah, Cameron, thoughts on the scenario I mentioned? What do you say to that?
Well, you started off by saying that you got 79 medals in competition, and that was really upsets you, or I don't know how you want to describe that feeling, that you didn't get to the 80th. But then you go on to say that, as I understand, you didn't play on because the person made such a good shot that you just were like, fine, I'm not going to even try to best that shot. So I'm a little bit on the seesaw here as far as I'm hearing, spirit of the award. And it's good that you did it because, I'm sure that person gained a lot of confidence for that. And I beat an international person that's on the Paralympic team. But on the other hand, I'm hearing I didn't get any medals, and that really kind of pissed me off. So, I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence, and usually I would just go the opposite way and argue with you, but since it's the new year, or almost the new year, I'm just going to point out both things that you said.
That's fair. And I will say that I counted the medals within the last year, which is after my playing career. Getting to that 79 mark, even though my family, my friends, and everything else want to say getting to 79 medals over 15 years is nothing to shake a stick at. But I guess there's
it's
that part
79 freaking medals. You should be proud of yourself. And how are you at math? Are you good at math?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay, you might want to recount because maybe you'll find that 80th, just like when it's an election and you've got to do a recount. Maybe you'll find that 80th medal or ribbon or whatever.
Maybe it's in a box somewhere.
Exactly.
Maybe,
check your parents' house.
But I've had like 4 people count this, and it comes back to 79. So it's I don't know. There's a little part of me that goes, maybe I do have a little bit of OCD because the round number bothers me, but whatever. Maybe we'll turn over a new leaf at 2025. But.
Well, as a surprise, Josh and I have a surprise for you. We do have a medal for being the best disability host of a podcast. So congratulations, you just got your 80th medal.
There you go.
Fantastic. I cannot wait to see that come in the mail, so I can put that on the rack. It would be good. My wife did try to count my multi-sport medal that I won as a child when I was part of the Blazers back when Kathy Ludwig was running that, and I told her, quote, that didn't count because I'm looking for bocce medals, not participation medals, which at the time I'm sure I was very grateful, but I had to take that one out of my count, to be perfectly honest with you. Cameron, do you want to rip on me a little more?
If you were an athlete at the Paralympics and you did 2 different sports and got a medal in each, would you count those?
Yeah.
I guess not, because they're different sports. So that's why you're not counting your other one?
No, but that was like a recreational medal that
medals are medals, buddy.
Yeah, I guess so. Anyway, Cameron and I obviously haven't seen each other in a week or so because we're on point on this 31st of December. If you're listening to the podcast on the day of release, Josh is probably rolling his eyes. I can't see him entirely, but he's probably rolling his
smiling.
eyes. Yeah.
I'm just enjoying the show.
Yeah. You're not supposed to be enjoying the show. You're supposed to be a participant.
You can be both.
We'll get to that.
You can do both.
Speaking of thrill of your life and winning your championship without winning your championship, the World Juniors are a thing, and Canada had a bit of a blip during this tournament as we record this, and they were defeated by Latvia in a shootout, and we could talk about whether the shootout should be a thing in the round robin. I'm going to go with no, not in a short tournament. I'm sure Cameron or Josh will argue with me, or both. But
sure.
What do you make of this World Juniors and Team Canada through 3 games as we've seen this, as we're doing this recording? They played 3 games. Who wants to go first on this one?
Go ahead, Josh.
Well, it's been interesting for sure. They started off against Finland, and I think that was probably going to be, at least to the novice observer, if you will, that was probably going to be the hardest game other than the Americans. And as it turned out, it was a strong game, and I'm just trying to remember. I believe they won that.
Yeah,
First game they won against Finland 4-0.
Thank you. So
You're welcome.
4-0 is certainly the way we want things to go. But the other games I've seen, the Latvia game, it was a good game. I just think they took a lot of immature penalties, a lot of dumb penalties, and I just think they overlooked their opponent. So I hate to say it, but I think they got what they deserved, and I hope they learned from it. Having said that, I watched them go up against Germany, and they didn't handle the Germans all that much better, really. There seems to be a lack of offense, and it just feels as if they sort of have this opinion that they're just going to walk through and get to the medal round, and that'll be that. But you have to win the games in order to get there, boys. So we'll see how it continues. Certainly, they've got the Americans tomorrow night, as I recall, which is kind of a tradition now that Russia is not really involved in the tournament, at least at this time as we record. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But for a team with the level of firepower that it's supposed to have, I haven't seen the offense show up yet, and that concerns me.
100%. It concerns me as well. They've got the defense, and they've been doing well with defense, but it's all online as far as who they maybe should have taken instead of who they have on the team. And I'm just tired. Well, first of all, I'm a Leaf fan. Everyone knows it. I don't care. Easton Cowan, he's on the team. Everyone's blaming him as far as like if the Canadians lose or so on and so forth. There's a bunch of BS online about that. So just want to get that off my chest. But the first win they got was 4-0. Yeah, we're used to, especially the first couple of games, big scores by Canada, 12-2, whatever. But this year, I guess the world's catching up to Canada, and it's not as big of a difference as far as the game goes. It's getting tighter, and the world is catching up to Canada and the U.S. But we've never lost to Latvia before. And I don't care if Latvia is catching up to us. There's no way in God's green Canadian earth that Latvia should have beat us. And it's disgusting. And they've got to do something about that. Like, there's absolutely no reason for it. And it just frustrates me to no end. And the next game, they ended up beating 3-0 against the Germans. And that you thought they might be able to get a bit bigger of a score there too to get the offense going. It was 1-0 for 2 periods, and then in the third they got a couple of goals. I believe one of them was an empty net goal, but I can't remember. I'm getting old.
You're correct.
Yeah, so one was an empty net goal. So to basically only win 2-0 over Germany, like the offense is horrible, and they need to do something about that, whether it's the power play, because it's as bad as the Leafs power play, for God's sakes. Like, they're hardly scoring anything. So I don't know if like the Leaf power play guy has gone there to coach that part of the team. Whoever it is should be fired, and they need different players on the ice. And I think they did try to change it up a bit in the German game, but like, I don't know. Yeah, a lot of people are happy that the world's catching up to Canada and the U.S., but I'm pissed.
I can understand that. And the only thing that I would add to what you've said is the Americans beat the Germans 10-4. That's how you expect that game to go. So clearly there is something.
Hold on a second. You expect the Germans to score 4 goals against the States?
Not necessarily do I expect them to score 4, but I expect the margin of victory to be high when it's a team like the United States or Canada versus a Germany. Nothing against the Germans, but traditionally they have not had the firepower. It's the same as if we've spoken offline. It's the same as we expected the Latvian game to go. We expected the Latvia game to be like 10 or 12-2 by the time the second period was done. And it didn't happen. Now, I will say that I do think part of what is helping these other nations is that as we listen to the commentation, sorry, I think I just made up a word there. As we listen to the commentary, as we listen to the commentary of these games, what you're hearing a lot of is, puck being played by so-and-so from Latvia who plays for Kamloops of the WHL, or who plays for Rimouski of the Q, or plays in Barrie of the OHL. So you're seeing a lot more international caliber players coming over and playing the North American game, which I think is helping them in this tournament. Having said that, I still agree with Cameron that we should not be losing to a Latvia, even if our goaltender is young and only 17 years old in that particular game. It doesn't matter. He was still a high-quality goalie, and he deserved better.
100%. And the other goalie that just played last night, he's played 2 games now, and he hasn't let a goal in. So I think they should ride him the rest of the way. Definitely put him in against the States, but...
I think they will. I just think that they saw the Latvia game as the one game in the round robin where you could give him a break.
Yeah. I'm worried about the game on New Year's Eve. I'll tell you that. It's going to be in a few hours from now. So,
here's my challenge.
Challenge? Is that a word too?
Yeah.
We're making up language today on the Neutral Zone, folks.
Here's my challenge that exists with the World Juniors. I have a problem. I love James Duthie. Okay, but when you say on a broadcast of the pregame that team deserves the criticism they're getting, I have a problem with that. These people are teenagers. They do not deserve the bashing that they were receiving from the general public after the game against Latvia. These are teenagers. They make mistakes. This is the design of this tournament. I completely disagree with James Duthie that they deserved as ruthless and as brutal criticism as they were getting online, blaming it on Easton Cowan, as Cameron mentioned, suggesting that we made the wrong pick and that we shouldn't have picked Easton Cowan, and it's just not appropriate stuff. Secondly, and I want both of your opinions on this, they had 56 shots in the game against Latvia, plus then they had another 40 something. And in the game against Germany, so combined total of shot attempts, so not necessarily shots on goal, but shot attempts, there were over 200 shot attempts. Sometimes you just have to tip your cap to the goalie and suggest that they had a better game. I don't think they played that badly against Latvia. I do think they took some really idiotic and dumb penalties. When we can't count to 3 in an overtime and we send out an extra guy, that's a problem for me. Yes, it didn't pay off. It didn't hurt them there. But then they took another penalty that they did get scored on, and Latvia scored on both power plays. Like and they're leading the competition in the most penalties. They're up to something like 18 penalties through 3 games. That's ridiculous. But I do not think at all that they deserve the ruthless criticism that they're getting on social media, Josh.
I think the criticism of the players, you're correct. Criticism of the coaching staff, I feel differently. The coaching staff needs to set them up for that game, needs to remind them that, okay, just because this is Latvia doesn't mean that this is going to be a walk in the park. You never know what could happen. Having said that, I agree with you that the goaltender for Latvia absolutely stood on his head. Cameron and I have both been in games where the puck hasn't left our zone, and it's a nightmare for a goalie. I have sat in my crease during games and thought to myself, I just don't want to allow double digits today. And then I proceed to allow 12. So, things happen. I mean, those kids from Latvia absolutely deserve to feel the high that they did. That was a huge accomplishment, beating us like that. At the end of it, our coaching staff needs to take some criticism for not having the team prepared. And ultimately, this coaching staff are the ones who put this team together. So if they don't perform the way they should, that's where the criticism needs to go, not on the individual players themselves. Although I would also tell you that most of those kids are top-level players on their junior teams, and so they are probably used to some level of criticism, because there are places in this country where junior hockey is taken incredibly seriously. And I would tell you that our friends down the road are one of those places, being London Knights.
It depends what type of criticism that the players were receiving. If they're like, oh, you're horrible, and, I wish you were dead, and all the stupid type criticism that I've seen online before about that kind of stuff, there's absolutely no need for that. But if it is constructive criticism where they're just not stepping up because they're not scoring goals, or they're not playing good defense, or they're not back checking, or certain things like that, go to town, because I think some of that is true. And they're hard at the CHL level on the teams and on the players, and they've got to get used to that, because it's only going to get worse. And if you can't manage it, like a lot of the times I can't manage anxiety and stress, then I have to realize, okay, well, I'm not meant to do this, or I'm not meant to do that. And they've got it's a learning process for them. But any like hatred or, vitriol towards them that wants to harm them, or, is uncalled for, is disgusting, and that shouldn't happen. But when you have internet, you can say whatever you want at the end of the day, so you can't stop it. You just have to try to ignore it, which is very hard to do. But some of the criticism, I think, is warranted. And the coaching staff as well, they picked this team. It seems to me like they needed a little bit more offense. So, there's and I forget where he's from, maybe Windsor, but there's a defenseman, and his name escapes me, that they could have chosen him, and he's an offensive defenseman, but they didn't choose that guy. So I don't know. I think they need a bit more offense. But this is the team that Doug Cameron or Dave Cameron? Dave, thanks. Chose. So ultimately, he's got to take ownership of the players that he picked.
Question here for you, Cameron. I think the way that the round robin has come out now, because Canada lost a game, and so did the United States. United States lost to Finland, who Canada defeated, and so we're on even footing. So right now, if we were to start the tournament, we would have suggested that the Canada-US game would come down to who would win the pool, which is ultimately what's going to be taking place here. Do you think that this team can put themselves in the gold medal game, or do you think they're going to be finishing on a different level on the podium, or not on the podium at all like they did last year?
It's going to show a lot when they play the States, and we'll see what happens. I don't have a lot of confidence that they're going to beat them. Sorry, Canada, but I'm a realist. I don't like their chances, but if they lose that game, that doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to be in the playoffs. So it's a short tournament. Anything can happen. If they lose that game to the States, I don't know. With the way they've been playing, I just don't have a lot of confidence that they're going to win anything. They might be out the first game of the playoffs, the first game that they play within the playoff format.
Right now, as I look at the standings, Group A, the top three are Canada, the US, and Finland. And in Group B, Czechia, Sweden, and Slovakia. I don't know if the top two make it. I don't know if the top three make it. Either way, top four?
Correct.
Okay.
It's a quarterfinal, so one plays 4, 2 plays 3, so on, and you cross that way.
I'm confused now because it doesn't make sense to me that Kazakhstan and Latvia can still make the medal round. But at any rate,
only the bottom 2 teams make it to the relegation, which means that the other 8 would make it to the quarterfinal.
Okay, so there's 10 teams, so the bottom 2 teams, so the bottom team in each group is going to make it to the relegation round. The rest are going to... Okay, I understand now. So basically, my point will still stand. I'm looking at this, and aside from the US, maybe Finland, maybe Sweden, I don't see Canada losing to some of these other teams, personally. So I think they do still have a chance, but they certainly have to clean up their act. The way they have played thus far is not going to win them any championship round. So if they can do that, if they can figure themselves out, and if they can score some goals, then I think they have a chance at winning a gold medal. If they don't, then they'll make it to the quarterfinals and be out.
Here's what I'll say. For years, the biggest criticism has been, we don't have a good goalie. We don't have good defense. We have good offense. We don't have a good goalie. We don't have a good defense. This year, we have the reverse. We have good defense, and we should have good offense, but that offense is not doing what it should be doing. Do I believe that this team can continue to not give up 5-on-5 goals? No, I don't. I think you're going to run into a team like the US who's going to score an even strength goal, and they're probably going to score 1 or 2 power plays. This means that Canada either has to out penalty them, if that's a phrase, or
that's another new word on the neutral zone.
We're coming up with them all today. I agree with you, Josh. I don't see another team on the other side where I go, we can't beat them, because we proved in the preliminary round, for whatever it's worth, that we could beat Sweden. Did Sweden give us our best, and vice versa? I doubt it, but at least we have it in the psyche that, hey, we beat Sweden in the preliminary round, so maybe that gives us a little bit. But no, they certainly have to clean up their act if they want to do this. Obviously, we're all rooting for Canada to win the World Juniors, but if we had to choose another team to root for if Canada got eliminated in either the quarterfinal or had to play for bronze, where would we be going? Start with you, Josh.
Who I think would win a gold medal and who I would root for would be 2 different answers. I'll be honest with you.
You can give both.
All right. So if Canada is not going to win a gold medal, who do I think it's going to be? That's easy. The Americans. The Americans are rolling through the tournament, with the exception of that loss to Finland, which was only by a goal. So I think one bounce and that could go the other way. So I think the Americans are the odds-on favorite for gold if it's not Canada. Now, I have been to far too many games against U.S. teams. I've seen far too much Canada versus USA hockey. I cannot bring myself to cheer for the United States. I just can't. Cannot do it. It makes me sick to think about. That leaves me with, who do I think could do it? I'm going to say Finland, because Finland has played well in games not involving Canada and the U.S. And in that U.S. game, they did beat the U.S. fair and square. So could they do that again? Sure they could. It would be lovely to see a Cinderella like a Latvia just put it together and barnstorm, but I think we all know that's not going to happen. They've had their gold medal game already, and that was against Canada, and they won. So I don't see them doing anything more in the tournament personally. But they are still in the top 4 of their pool at the moment. So they have a chance to get into the medals and possibly do something.
With still having to play Germany
right
in the last round robin game.
But that should be, hopefully, a fairly even game. That might be a game worth watching, to be honest, because those 2 teams might be fairly close. But yeah, I think Finland is probably the team I would root for outside of Canada, but who I think will win the gold medal, if Canada doesn't, it's going to be the US. Mr. Jenkins.
That is a ridiculous question, Brock, because I am going for Canada and nothing but Canada. Canada until I die. Do I need to sing the national anthem on here? Because I will. It's Canada.
No.
The States, they can just go down to Texas for all I care and do whatever they do in Texas. I don't want them to win. I met a friend, her name is Lotta, and she is from Finland, and met her years ago at a resort. So we always message one another over the tournament. So if Canada was to lose, I'm kind of leaning towards Finland only because of her, and she's a great person. But if I didn't know her, I would say screw Finland too. But because I love Lotta, she's an amazing person, I would pick Finland maybe as a second. Who do I think's going to win it all? You know what? What about Sweden?
Good.
I think they've got a good team and they could win it all, but everyone's going to be disappointed because Canada's going to learn their lesson. They're going to change up the power play. They're going to change a few things up, and Canada's going to win it. Canada until I die. Nobody else.
Cameron is wearing, and I don't know if this is on purpose or not.
It is. I wore this specifically because I knew you were talking about the juniors.
Cameron is wearing a Canadian red, white, and black hat. And does it say Canada?
It does say Canada on it.
And it's got a maple leaf on the front. So he is like bleeding.
He is wearing his
Canada
colors proudly.
all
Damn
over
right.
this thing. I agree with you, Cameron. I get very, very angry / emotional when Canada doesn't win. If you talk to my wife, I was not a happy soul after the game against Latvia. It was like I even picked to do a social gathering on said day because I thought, oh yeah, this is not even going to be close. It'll be fine, whatever. But we're not going to go down this road. But anyway, I am rooting for Canada. I believe they're going to get it sorted out. I believe they're going to beat the States on New Year's Eve in a few hours, if you're listening to this on the day of release. But if I had to pick another team to root for, I would root for Sweden, and I'll tell you why. Sweden has not won the championship since 2012. They went on that 49 win streak in the round robin and did not win the championship. It has been painful to watch Sweden play at this tournament. They have faltered in the quarterfinals. They have faltered in the semifinals. If I had to pick somebody outside of Canada, I would pick Sweden. But Cameron, if I could be wearing a toque, I would, because I also bleed Canadian. And I just think that they're going to win this because it's our national sport and it's in Canada. So who else to win but Canada? So yeah, that's my 2 cents on what will be done. And there will always be an upset in the quarterfinals. Somebody always comes out of the woodwork and upsets somebody. Last year, Canada was on the short end of that stick, losing to Czechia. We need to redeem that this year, but there will be an upset of some kind in the quarterfinal when we get there. That is the end of our program for this week. I would like to thank Josh Watson, Cam Jenkins. I'd also like to thank Mark Aflalo, who does our technical producing. On behalf of everybody at the Neutral Zone, we want to wish you a happy new year. Be safe, be well, and drink responsibly.
The Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Connect with them at ON Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca. Now that's a winning combination.